I would like to say when I did, I don't know if I shared, but when I went back for my doctor's appointment, and as I said, I had peace when I went in there knowing that I was not going to have this surgery. So when I met with the doctor and he looked at, the results from the test that they ran from the defibrillator, all the tests that they ran, they found nothing. There was no reasons, for me to have surgery. And so the only thing he said to me, he said, well, come back in 3 months and I'll check you again. But I know that as I continue, as Rod and I continue the way we're already eating, the results are only going to get better. Yep. So, I'm knowing, I am not going to have any type of heart surgery.
Yep. And like Geneva said, the weight loss, I've lost 40 pounds. And the focus of the diet is not weight loss. Weight loss is what they call
bonus, really.
A bonus, an after effect, or a side effect. Mm-hmm. Weight loss is just a side effect. Could you imagine? Instead of focusing on I got to lose weight, focus on your overall health, and the weight loss is a free bonus, like he said. Enjoy the film, enjoy the instruction.
During that 24 hours there in the hospital, a lot of thinking was transpiring. What I was getting ready to lose, relationships, futures, dreams, were all getting ready to be lost. We went home on a Friday. For some reason, this movie, Forks Over Knives, came back in my head, and I thought, I think I might need to go watch this again. By 10:30 that evening, we're in our kitchen, and we're emptying pantries, refrigerators, freezers, totally out. And that was the beginning of my journey to go plant-based with my life.
I think that animal products, meat, dairy, and eggs, are going to be the cigarettes of the next decade. The idea that people used to smoke inside, on airplanes, in doctors' offices, we see ads with doctors promoting cigarettes, and it's just a novelty at this point. And I think that the time will come where animal products are a novelty, and we can all say, oh, that was really something. Boy, they just didn't know what they were doing. Good thing that we know the facts now. We're headed in that direction. It's just a matter of when.
Food is so tied to our culture. Our ceremonies, our rituals are all associated with food. We celebrate with food. We even mourn with food. And it's fascinating. We'll meet after a funeral and we'll be talking about the person who's no longer with us, and we'll be eating the same food that put them in the grave in the first place. We're just not mindful about the whole relationship we have with food.
As an orthopedic surgeon, I think it's really tragic what the standard American diet does to the body. And I've asked the Eating You Alive crew to come in and document surgery. I deal with inflammation all the time in my patients, and the standard American diet feeds that inflammation. And so you can turn off the inflammation if you go to a whole food, plant-based diet, and you can reverse the degeneration that occurs in our bodies as we age. Hippocrates is kind of given the acknowledgement of being the father of medicine. He's actually also the father of shoulder surgery. He was born in 460 BC, described a surgical procedure that we still do somewhat of a variant of today. But he said, in effect, there are two things: to know and to believe one knows. To know is science, to believe one knows is ignorance. And I added, to believe one knows is insanity, because I believed I knew what was healthy and it almost killed me. Now I know what is healthy. I know the science, and I know the science behind why plants are so healthy.
I'm an avid runner and bike rider, and I've seen many of the people that are about my age and are built like me, that are active runners and riders, who end up with heart problems. And it kind of drove home a point to me that you can't out-exercise a bad diet.
People often ask me for my kids age 9 and 10, do they eat the way that you eat? Well, they're 9 and 10, they don't have much of a choice to eat some of the things that we eat. I said, but I tell them a simple fact. Have you fed the good guys or the bad guys today? If you haven't fed the good guys, the bad guys are going to win out. There is a role and a place for certain medications, but you have to understand the risk. There's a risk with being plant-based too. You're going to lose weight. Your skin may clear up, you might get more energy. All those things are a risk. That's just a part of life.
Don't let your culture hold your heart hostage. I really believe that diet is the primary way that we need to change things. Based on all of the incidents of just hypertension, diabetes, and obesity that occurs when you eat animal products versus vegetable products. Not just risk factors, but mortality is really dependent on what the diet has.
I dropped my blood pressure from about 128 to 95. And as well, my total cholesterol went from 206 to 130. And my bad cholesterol dropped from 106 to 70. There's no medication that we use that can achieve that. This was in 4 weeks. So that really encouraged me to keep following a plant-based diet.
How many people have had their loved ones die from preventable disease? Heart disease is our #1 killer, yet it can be prevented, treated, reversed without drugs, without surgery, with diet and lifestyle change, particularly diet. A whole food plant-based diet is more powerful than anything we have in medicine when it comes to some of these chronic diseases. We have tremendous power over our health destinies. But, we have to, take personal responsibility and actually do it. If we wait for the system to catch up, it may be too late.
Hi, I'm Dr. Baxter Montgomery. I'm a cardiologist and cardiac electrophysiologist here in Houston, Texas. 13 years ago, we started integrating our clinical treatment with plant-based nutrition. So the heart here is in congestive heart failure, beating around 20 to 24%. Here it's beating about 50%. After being on a plant-based diet for 78 days, much improved. Someone in her condition may have needed, surgery, could have needed a bypass surgery, she may have needed a defibrillator. She may have even, been placed on the heart transplant list. But instead of that, with plant-based nutrition, the heart improved significantly. And these are the types of findings we see on a regular basis. It's important for individuals to know that, despite how sick you are, we've seen individuals who are very ill. In fact, I've treated 2 different patients who were in the hospital on life support. One person on life support, we fed her green food through her PEG tube, and I detoxed her in the hospital, and she eventually walked out. So don't give up. We haven't gotten into the most fundamental aspect of our health, which is how we take care of the human frame. And it's as simple as plant-based food, fresh air, sunshine, and water. So there's a huge obsession with protein, and a lot of this has to do with the education of the nutrition and medical community, or perhaps miseducation, if you will, and protein is emphasized. The Western society, as with other societies, animal protein is a major component of what people eat. When I was growing up, you didn't have a meal if there was not, dead animal flesh on the table. Animal protein can trigger inflammation. It has adverse effects on the kidney. It can have adverse effects on the blood vessels, adverse effects on the heart. You get more than enough protein from plant-based foods. The most important nutrient, in my opinion, is water. I mean, the healthy human body in its healthy state is about 70–75% water. I'll pose a question. I say, well, if you were, left on an island and deserted for just, let's say 25 days, you can have 25 days worth of baked chicken, or you have 25 days of water. You can't have both, one or the other. And almost invariably, people choose the water because they know that they can't survive 25 days without water. As much as we emphasize eating the proper food, which starts and ends with a plant-based diet, it's also important to get fresh air and sunshine on a regular basis. So at least a couple of hours. Man-made rainbows. Oh wow. Another patient who's currently in her mid-90s came to see us at the age of 89, and at that time she was taking about 22 medications, including about 40 units of insulin twice a day. And she'd been on insulin for 40 years. We put her on a raw detox, and we got off the insulin within a couple of days of her being on a raw detox. She's down to taking no medication the last I've seen, and she hardly has to come and see us as a patient. She's in her mid-90s now.
I came into this arena as a traditional doctor, doing procedures and putting them on the optimal medications. However, when I made this discovery for my own health and then subsequently for my patients, I made a major change. As far as I know, we're the only facility in the United States that has an on-site plant-based restaurant that integrates it all in one. If I'm a physician who likes steak and eggs, it would be very difficult for me to counsel and aggressively counsel a patient away from eating these foods. This is our commercial kitchen, our restaurant, and the medical facility of the future will have a designated restaurant kitchen that functions not only from a culinary standpoint, but also from a scientific standpoint. We see individuals in severe congestive heart failure, which is often thought of as a death sentence. But when they make fundamental changes in the way they eat, they go from a death sentence to a life sentence. And that's an important differential.
I'm Patricia Wiggins, and this is my husband, Carl. He's Dr. Montgomery's patient. In this 3-week time, he's eliminated about 40 pounds of fluid from his body, and his mental clarity is much better, and he's now walking without his cane. When we came in, he could barely walk with the cane, and he had to hold on to me or to the wall or something to steady himself.
So what you can see here is a model of an artery, and there's several slices here. And when someone consumes a diet high in saturated fat, and saturated fat, by the way, is code word for animal protein fat. If you then start to look anywhere an artery has this amount of disease, you're compromising blood flow to that organ. And if a thin core ruptures, that's what leads to a heart attack. And so this predisposed to heart disease. This is the type of lesion that would be considered for a stent placement or for bypass surgery. However, you can reverse this type of disease with optimal plant-based nutrition. It was that severe.
He wanted to make food our medicine and not pharmaceuticals. The added bonus is the fact that he is an MD, he is a cardiologist, he does know that part of medicine, and he's not against it if it's needed.
So if you were to look at all of the healthcare facilities here, all the hospitals, all the emergency rooms in this expansive medical center, and we were to walk around and search for one patient who was suffering from protein deficiency, we'd be challenged to find one. In regards to the prevalence of heart disease among different ethnic groups, the CDC clearly shows that African American women have the most heart disease in terms of prevalence and morbidity mortality from heart disease. Next to them would be African American men. More women die from heart disease than men in general, and then more African American women die from heart disease than any other race, gender segment that we know of. Availability, convenience, these are all important things that I find, and I think it's going to make a difference the more we make the food available. People do not realize how delicious plant food is. At the end of the day, it's going to be the food that makes the difference. I have a lot of friends who are ethical vegans, and I applaud you. When I came into eating plant-based, I wasn't aware of the horrors that happen to animals, and I think there's more messaging needs to come about with that. The other aspect of being ethical vegans is that we have to look at our own bodies, and we have to be ethical to ourselves first and foremost, because if we're not healthy, then we can't be a benefit to others, animals, etc. So I often tell my patients that the #1 animal you want to be ethical to is yourself. So foods that are minimally processed, raw, you want a lot of live foods that has the water content is maintained. These are going to be some of the most healthy foods, and if it is cooked, you want to either dehydrate it at relatively low temperatures, boil or steam it. And these are some simple approaches that individuals can take to consume a diet that's not only healthy for the environment as a whole, but also healthy for your local environment, which is your body. If we can fundamentally change the way we eat, we can get rid of the need for so much expense and so much time and effort toward helping people get better, or I should say, helping people live with their illnesses. We can just simply change what they eat, we can help them reverse their conditions,
and live a healthier life.
Physicians should know because it determines so many different aspects of disease.
Doctors are not taught. They get their knowledge how everyone else gets their knowledge, basically, through the media.
There's a lot of myth about it because people are afraid if I don't eat meat, I will run into a protein deficiency. That's a myth that doesn't exist, but it's planted in our brains.
The meat, dairy and egg industry are having quite significant influence on the information going out to doctors.
Nutrition is important for medical doctors because many of our chronic diseases are related to nutrition.
Doctors don't know about this, and we didn't know about this until 6 years ago because nutrition is hardly taught in medical schools around the world. So you spend 4, 5, 6 years in medical school to learn all the other things. It's a big topic. And nutrition is only taught for a few hours.
In order to become a cardiologist, for example, one has to go to college, medical school, an internal medicine residency, and then do a cardiology fellowship. Throughout every aspect of that training, we get very little, if any, nutrition training.
Nutrition, or bad nutrition, is behind so many of the chronic diseases that we treat.
Nutrition is, in my view, essential for medical doctors to include in their practice, in their treatment of patients, because with nutrition, we are able to influence chronic diseases in a very positive way.
Nutrition is the most important thing that physicians should know because it determines so many different aspects of disease.
When you look at the Western world, we live longer than ever, but also the chronic diseases are still increasing. Type 2 diabetes is thriving in the world. Cancer is increasing.
Many of these chronic diseases can be stopped or even reversed. Looking at heart disease, diabetes type 2, or even certain cancers.
I think it's essential to make a change and to add plant-based nutrition to the treatment of patients, because we can not only stabilize diseases, we can even reverse it.
That is something that we won't see with the modern medicine we have today, with the pills and the procedures.
Nutrition is actually seen as a separate specialty. There's nursing, there's physical therapy, there are a variety of things that make up our team-based care. And nutrition has always been off in the aspect of someone else. And we do have nutritionists, and our nutritionists in the United States particularly are pretty good at diabetes control. Not quite as good, based on the evidence, at lowering people's weights. But those are the real two things that they have tried very hard to do. There hasn't been a lot of traction, unfortunately, in the area of regression of disease or treatment of inflammatory conditions. Those they believe belong to the physicians, and it really should be quite the opposite. We should know more about nutrition. They should know more about prevention of a variety of disease, particularly through plant-based dieting, because the data is actually out there. A lot of the data that I quote is actually in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, and articles that they should be actually very familiar with, and yet we just have a handful of plant-based physicians and a smaller handful of plant-based dietitians.
Doctors are not taught about it because there is a lot to learn in medical school. You have to learn anatomy, they have to learn... If you discuss this topic with people in the university, they say, well, we cannot accommodate because it's not regarded to be important. It's not yet a priority. Why? Because doctors and the universities have not understood how powerful plant-based nutrition can be.
Doctors in general don't know about the power of nutrition in healthcare.
Part of it's that we don't get a lot of nutrition education in medical school.
But now we know, also through the WHO since last year, that red meat is a possible cause of cancer, for instance. So it's not our best friend, but doctors are not taught. They get their knowledge how everyone else gets their knowledge, basically, through the media. And the media are not educated either.
And I think more recently what's happened is there's an emphasis on evidence-based medicine, where the highest level of evidence is considered a double-blind randomized controlled trial where Group A gets this tablet and Group B gets a placebo. And of course that favours high levels of evidence for drugs and that actually only have small benefits, but well-proven small benefits. I think also in recent years I've noticed in my medical magazines here in Australia that the meat, dairy and egg industry are having quite significant influence on the information going out to doctors.
The difference in treating a patient with medication compared to nutrition is in chronic diseases. What the doctor will see is that the patient will get better. And for instance, if there is hypertension, the doctor will have to lower medication and eventually stop. And diabetes type 2, even when people have been for years on diabetes medication, if they are really adherent to a whole food plant-based diet, the doctor can eventually usually bring down medication and in many cases stop. So that makes that's for the patient, of course, an enormous. It's also that they don't have the side effects of medication, and also that their whole chronic disease will not progress any further. For instance, with diabetes, there are so many complications. Heart disease is the biggest one, but also blindness or kidney disease. Imagine that you stay away from all of that.
There are a few conditions, and particularly in cardiology, that you're born with it. Congenital heart disease, there's something there's nothing you can do about it. There are cholesterol conditions such as familial hyperlipidemia, and if you have those genes, you're going to have a difficult time with cholesterol management. But for the most part, I would say a good 95% at least of what we do are degenerative conditions that actually occur because of what we eat.
So it's fantastic for the patient, but imagine what it would be for the doctor as well.
Most of us became doctors because we want to heal. We want to treat diseases so patients can live a perfectly happy life. And with a lot of the chronic diseases, that's not the case, because we are proud of the fact that we live longer, but we live many more years probably in misery due to a lot of chronic diseases. So doctors can experience firsthand that patients get well and they feel great about it.
Having a whole foods plant-based diet in your sort of medical toolkit or armamentarium of medical treatments, you know, I guess would give you a treatment option that was actually going to get people better, because it was going to be taking away some of the causes. And so rather than just giving someone their blood pressure or diabetes tablet and gradually watching them get worse over the years, albeit more slowly if you treat them well and manage their disease well, you'd actually see some of them get better. And that would also be good for the doctor as well, because you know, we'd actually be able to feel good that our patients were getting better.
As a doctor, you want to heal patients. And with chronic diseases, that's basically not possible. They will tell the patient, these are the medications you have, and you will have to use them for the rest of your life. Wow, that's quite a sentence, isn't it? And now they can heal the patient and bring down the medication and get them off medication. So satisfying for a doctor as well, that you actually can see the patient get better.
Here at the American College of Cardiology, we are working on developing a larger database of review articles. Some of them are actually in review right now and hopefully will be published soon. They're really aimed at cardiologists, but this is an area where more and more literature is happening every day. You have some real gurus around the country in the United States, such as Michael Greger. He has a wonderful website. He's a family practice physician, I believe, who spends pretty much all of his time writing and reading about nutrition. You have Caldwell Esselstyn with his website, Dean Ornish with his website, Joel Furman. You have a lot of people who are dedicating themselves to getting the word out. And so there really is not a paucity of information right now, and just a Google search such as regression of heart disease, for example, will bring up a lot of these things.
The question is now, how can doctors educate themselves in nutrition? Because it's not really taught in continuous medical education either. Although I have to say, especially in the United States, there are now conferences specially geared on nutrition, plant-based nutrition and health. So there is the International Plant-Based Nutrition in Healthcare Conference. The last few years it was always in Los Angeles and Anaheim. But there are a lot of other plant-based nutrition conferences. PCRM, which is the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine in Washington, D.C., also every year has a nutrition conference. And so that's a good way, of course, to start and to get a little bit an idea.
How can you educate yourself more about plant-based nutrition as a doctor? There are two books I could recommend. This is easy to read. That is the so-called China study, which was a study done in rural China. The conclusion of this book is the more plant-based food people would eat in rural China, the less prone they were to chronic diseases. Very easy to read and very compelling.
Another good book is one that came out last year. It's called How Not to Die, which means not you will die in the end, but how not to die of chronic diseases and how not to die prematurely. And this book by Dr. Michael Greger writes about the 15 leading causes of death and the research behind it, what nutrition can do for it. And it has about over 2,500 references. So it's all referenced. So all the research people can find and read it themselves.
And there is actually a certificate level course that you can do online to get a certificate in plant-based nutrition with eCornell.
A whole food plant-based diet is a diet based on 4 groups: fruits, vegetables, whole grains and legumes.
You know that you get all the nutrients you need if you eat from all 4 quadrants.
The best way of consuming these foods is as whole as possible in their natural state. So don't process them too much. It's better to eat an apple than to drink the apple juice. So we get also all the fiber and all the nutrients that come with them.
The only thing you would need to supplement is vitamin B12. But if you eat balanced from this so-called power plate, that's the core, that's the secret of whole food plant-based nutrition.
There's no need for meat for iron or dairy for calcium. And as for protein, yes, my giant morning bowl of porridge actually meets the Australian Institute of Sport athletes post-training protein requirement of 20 grams plus.
What is also a pleasant side effect of this diet, the food is rich in nutrients and very low in calories. Most of the typical Western food is the other way around. You have a lot of calories and hardly any nutrition.
I always tell folks that they need to supplement 2 things when they're doing a completely plant-based diet. Number 1 is B12. And why is that? Because if you're eating animals that eat dirty vegetables. If you eat dirty vegetables, you're going to get B12. It comes from the soil. If you're a human and you're a vegetarian, you're probably going to wash your vegetables, and so you're not getting that B12. So just take a B12 supplement. Don't eat the animals who ate them. It doesn't make sense. The other thing that you have to supplement is the retirement income, because you're going to live longer. So those are the 2 things I warn people. The other nutrients are actually all there, pretty much. I mean, people will argue about some very arguable things like, oh, you've got to have omega-3 fatty acids. Well, first of all, there are vegetable sources of omega-3s. Point A and point B is that in cardiology, all of our omega-3 fatty acid trials, it'll prevent heart attack, it'll prevent stroke, it'll reduce rhythm disturbances. They all blew up, they were negative. And so that's happened with pretty much every supplement in cardiology. Vitamin C, vitamin A, notable for the fact that it increased, if the patients were in the smoking group, it increased the lung cancer rate. So we really don't recommend vitamin A in smoking. Vitamin E was another one in the HOPE trial that did absolutely nothing. Folic acid. So why am I listing all these things? Because they're embarrassingly things that we were used to actually prescribe, and we had to go back and take the prescriptions back. And when the large randomized trial said that they actually don't do any good, and some of them showed a tendency toward harm. So in terms of micronutrients, if a person is eating a whole food plant-based diet, with or without the veggie burgers and the processed soy and the processed stuff that I don't see the data, I see a lot of opinions, a lot more heat than light, okay, if you know what I mean. If you're eating that sort of diet, you're pretty much getting everything, and just watch the B12.
In general, people are a little bit scared if you talk about whole food plant-based diet and eliminating all the animal products, because they are afraid that they might miss out on certain nutrients. And I understand, because generations have been brought up that we need meat and we need dairy. We need meat, the protein and the iron from meat, and we need from dairy the calcium. But think about it. How did it get in the animals in the first place? They got it from vegetables. The animals we eat are vegetarians, are herbivores. So we can eat it straight from the source instead of eating it through the middleman, the middle animal. And the animal, eating it via the animal gives us a lot of toxic products in our body. Even the iron from meat is highly oxidative in our body, so gives a high oxidative stress. It always has saturated fats, which are not healthy, trans fats, certain hormones, where even if the animal is not being given extra hormones, it has growth hormones that can promote cancer in our body. So we should cut out the animal in the middle and go straight to the plants ourselves.
There's a lot of myth about it, because people are afraid, if I don't eat meat, I will run into a protein deficiency. That's a myth. That doesn't exist, but it's planted in our brains. The same, oh, what about my iron? Well, whole food plant-based nutrition offers you a lot of the natural iron. So don't be afraid, it's okay.
The real question about whole food plant-based diet is, what doesn't it cure? I've actually been many times, if I just give you the last few months, sitting in a clinic, getting a lot of referrals these days, specifically for nutrition, interestingly enough. So we call it our cardio nutrition department within cardiology now. And it's interesting that I'm sitting there, because of the electronic medical record, I have to have the computer open anyway. And as I like to share with people, whatever literature, whether it's Esselstyn's image of the artery that opens up, I actually show those to patients because I've got, a search engine right there. Well, I've had the experience of having patients sit there and ask, well, I also have multiple sclerosis, ulcerative colitis, diabetic neuropathy. These are ones where, and I actually would type the word diabetic neuropathy vegan diet, and an article comes up. Invariably, these conditions actually have some data, and that particular one, it was just dramatic improvement that occurred. It's actually done, that study was done by Neil Barnard in the United States, another sort of plant-based guru. Then you've, for the ulcerative colitis one, a real randomized trial was done and showed that you have 0% recurrences in the first year and 10% in the second year. There's no medication that could come close to matching that. So I'm really wondering at this point, everyone knows if they're in the tennis world, about the inflammatory condition of lupus and Sjogren's syndrome, because Venus Williams had Sjogren's syndrome and wasn't able to play, and then they put her on the steroids and her joints would feel better, but then she couldn't really practice as well, and someone asked her to try a vegan diet, and she's back playing, and she's 36 or 37. She played really well yesterday.
One of the problems with the Western diet the food contributes to what we call chronic inflammation. That means chronic irritation in your body, and that is probably one of the root causes of the chronic illnesses we have discussed before. You reverse that process because the nutrients in plants are rich in cancer-fighting properties. They have anti-aging properties, and the list goes on and on.
Bottom line is, I think we have some literature on a variety, particularly inflammatory conditions, where it seems to make sense, because we do know that C-reactive protein, an inflammatory marker in the body, does go down, cholesterol goes down. It may be that everything that has to do with inflammation improves dramatically with plant-based nutrition, and it ought to be a cornerstone of therapy of every one of those conditions.
Plant-based nutrition is not only good for heart disease, for cardiovascular disease, but also for type 2 diabetes, for obesity, but many other conditions. We know, for instance, autoimmune diseases, for instance, rheumatoid arthritis, or psoriasis, or Crohn's disease, all chronic debilitating diseases, and with a strict whole food plant-based diet, these diseases can be reversed. Another example, erectile dysfunction, will respond to plant-based nutrition. Some forms of cancer, like low-grade prostate cancer, responds well to plant-based nutrition. Even we have now Alzheimer's disease. We know that people on a typical Western diet, including meat and the heme iron, are more at risk to develop Alzheimer's disease. Blindness, cataract, old age blindness, the same experience. Lower risk when you're on a plant-based diet, higher risk when you're on Western diet. So it's a little bit boring, but it's a very consistent pattern throughout many diseases.
The beauty with a whole food plant-based diet is that it's not only healthy for people that have heart disease or diabetes, but for most of our chronic diseases. And there are many of those. So except for heart disease and diabetes, cancer, many cancer can be prevented, or even when people get cancer, they can help their body heal with a whole food plant-based diet. But also autoimmune diseases, for instance, rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's disease, colitis. All these illnesses are basically food-borne. They start in our gut. And when we have a very healthy gut, we will get rid of these diseases. And that is wonderful. That's amazing. Animal-based foods can disrupt the healthy bacteria in our gut. And the plant-based foods will restore it. And that is one way of healing our bodies.
A whole foods plant-based diet has been said by experts, much wiser than myself, to have a wide breadth of effect. That is the same diet that can help people lose weight, that can reverse heart disease, can also improve diabetes, can also be used to treat autoimmune disease. It can also be used to slow the growth or prevent cancer in some instances.
We talk about whole food plant-based diet, and other people might say, yeah, so that's vegan. And in a sense, that is true. It's vegan. We are not eating any animal products.
You can be a vegan and not eat any animal products because you could still be a junk vegan. You could still eat a lot of processed food or food which is very high in fat or trans fat or very sugary.
And that is a big difference, because people that eat whole food plant-based, they come from the health side of things and are in the first place focused on health. So vegans also bring it further. They will avoid any animal products in everything they use. So cosmetics, their shoes, you name it, everything they use, they don't want any animal to be hurt. For the whole food plant-based people, that might be the case, but is not necessarily the case. So some people that purely do it for health might still have, like leather shoes, for instance.
The difference between a whole foods plant-based diet and a vegan diet is that the emphasis in the whole foods plant-based diet is, we like to look at it as of adding in. The emphasis is on eating lots of whole grains, legumes, starchy, non-starchy vegetables and fruits. Whereas a vegan diet can include, and often does include, highly processed food like vegetable oils and refined grains, and processed food like vegan meats and vegan cheese. And although it could be said that a whole foods plant-based diet, I guess, is a form of a vegan diet, you can have a vegan diet that's actually not very healthy and not based on many whole plant foods at all.
In the United States, this is becoming a huge business, meat replacement, animal product replacement. And so every few months, as I'm showing my patients something that they could use instead of whatever their favorite toxic animal product is, and I've actually had incredible success going to a search engine, type in vegan blank whatever, okay? And I've struck out 3 times. One woman wanted bison, a guy wanted armadillo, and a person wanted possum. There are no vegan possum products, but if you go with mainstream American diet, you can get almost everything completely replaced. Chicken is probably the biggest product, just the number of things and the number of plants that can be turned into chicken. And it's everything from mushroom protein to whole grain to soy to so I'm not actually sure I know what Gardein protein is. I think it's chickpeas perhaps, but they, multiple brands, and you can get, it sounds a little bit like that Forrest Gump movie, when he was talking about the shrimp. You really can get chicken nuggets, chicken breasts, chicken patties, chicken legs, you can get chicken anything in most grocery stores. And so if the first thing I do, if I can convince them to do a whole food plant-based diet, great. If they're reluctant, I immediately go to the transition diet. Tell me what you like and I'm going to find it for you.
Although most people who've changed to a whole foods plant-based diet will tell you just change overnight, changed instantly, when you ask them how they did it, most of them actually took weeks or even months to do it. Because it can take some time, and some people might say just, start having some meals, maybe make you breakfast whole foods plant-based each day. And I guess it depends on the urgency. If you've just had a heart attack, you probably want to change virtually overnight. If you're an otherwise healthy athlete, you might want to spend several weeks sort of leaning into it and slowly changing over.
Ben & Jerry's, one of the biggest ice cream manufacturers in the United States, they make vegan ice cream. Now, if you're overweight and you're diabetic, I don't think that that's a good idea to eat ice cream of any kind. But I know it's not going to increase your plaque burden directly, it's just going to be a little more indirect. And so I think if people are really struggling, this whole idea of a transition diet where you convert everything, and you could do this. Burger King, not McDonald's, but Burger King in the United States has a veggie burger. White Castle, which probably doesn't exist outside of the United States, I wouldn't think, but it's a burger chain. They started making veggie burgers about 2 years ago. And the products actually sell. And so I'm not convinced that it's the best thing for everyone because it still has a lot of the American fat and salt content, which people should be very careful of, particularly if they're overweight, diabetic, and hypertensive. So anyway, but this is an opportunity to get people to change, get out of the idea that they're going to go to the meat counter and buy meat. They can get different kinds of cheese, all made out of plants. And if folks are fans of milk, there's an interesting thing. A few years ago, there was soy milk and almond milk, and now there's about 12 different kinds of milk. And I don't know if you can get them here in Australia, but they certainly can in the United States. I mean, things I'd never heard of. Rice milk, okay. Hemp, okay. And so, there must be a massive amount of money in this business because people are really going into it. And but it does give us an opportunity to get away from the animal products, so I welcome it.
I think the greatest challenge with changing to a whole foods plant-based diet is eating out and having other people prepare your food. I've had patients who are You know, sort of pretty ordinary middle-aged guys who live at home and are not very complex about their cooking or anything, and they say to me, look, at home this is really simple. It's so simple to cook whole foods, plant-based. But then as soon as you start going out to restaurants or cafes where other people start preparing the food, suddenly there's oil poured into everything. The grains are often refined. There are all these processed plant foods in there rather than whole foods. And I find that when I try and eat out, one of the challenges is not just getting the processed foods out of the meals, but it's actually getting enough calories of things like brown rice and wholemeal pasta and potatoes and beans.
I've had some people say that if they go to their particular grocery store and they look at the hot dogs and then the vegan hot dogs, that the vegan hot dogs are more expensive. I think that's not uniformly true, but expense can be an issue. And my response, of course, is, well, don't eat the vegan hot dogs, let's do whole food plant-based. It's very inexpensive. It's just, so finances can be a major issue. The other major problem is just the fact there's inertia. People are used to doing what they've been doing, and it's hard to get them to change. And it's hard to see, even if you show them a picture of Bill Clinton after his second cardiac procedure, and then changing to plant-based diet, and he's great now. Well, that's someone else. And it's interesting that we all have this idea that we're somehow immortal and we can smoke cigarettes, but we won't get lung cancer and that sort of thing. It's just, and then there's a handful of us that are exactly the opposite. They're pretty sure that whatever I do is going to get me, and therefore I'm going to do the best I can. If it's much easier to deal with those kind of people than the people who really are resistant to understanding that they have a direct impact on their outcome with their choices.
When people hear about whole food plant-based diet and they think, wow, that sounds really interesting, that, you know, I would like to do that. How should they start? And that's not always easy, because usually people think, oh, I have to leave out now the dairy, I have to leave out all meats. So now there is a big gap on my empty place on my plate. What do I do now? And yeah, it's not easy. I think the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, pcrm.org, is a really good website to start off with. Very comprehensive information on all sorts of issues related to this way of eating and your health. Also for pregnant women, for lactating women, the babies, so that's all been addressed. They also have a 21-day Kickstart program. It's all for free, you only have to register. It starts every first of the month, and I think that's a really good and also fun way, because they have good videos, they have certain celebrities that talk and you know, are also involved, so I think that would be a good approach. Furthermore, in Australia, we have a really good website, very comprehensive information and quality information there. It's called wholefoodplantbasedaustralia.com.au. And there is also, for people that are on Facebook, a very supportive Facebook group called Whole Food Plant-Based Aussies. And that's where you find a lot of information, but also a lot of support.
To overcome the challenges in trying to transition to a whole foods plant-based diet, you could do a live-in program and go and do a 10-day John McDougall program or something like that. But I guess it might mean mostly cooking your own food within your own family for a period of time, and starting to regard going out as more a social event and being less dependent on the food you might get when you go out.
How can a whole food plant-based diet lifestyle reverse heart disease? It's too good to be true, but it's true. We have seen in very reliable research that patients suffering from coronary artery narrowing, so with the well-known chest pain, the angina, one group of these patients were given a whole food plant-based diet. The other group of patients followed the advice of their cardiologist, and we could see after 2 years and after 5 years that the narrowing of the coronary arteries actually improved. We could also demonstrate in those patients that they had significantly less chest pain and had significantly less cardiac events. And this is amazing because with all the cholesterol lowering drugs, with all the procedures, with the angioplasties, we can sometimes stabilize disease, but we cannot reverse it. And I don't know of any other diet so far but whole food plant-based nutrition where this was demonstrated in very solid research.
A whole food plant-based diet can reverse heart disease, and we have seen that with angiograms and certain scans that can see how the heart muscle is being oxygenated, gets its blood before the start of going on a plant-based diet and afterwards. But now, how does that work? Why does that happen? I think we have to realize that all these chronic diseases, including heart disease, is a chronic inflammation disease. And because of the high fats, for instance, but it's not only saturated fat and cholesterol, there are other factors as well that comes with animal products. The heme iron, for instance, so the blood iron, and also products are being produced by through our gut bacteria, and then the liver. It's called TMAO. It's highly atherogenic, so that means that it damages the artery walls. When we take away these inflammatory components from our diet, then the body gets the opportunity to heal and starts just cleaning out the garbage, basically. So now, because if you keep eating this, it's breakfast, lunch, dinner, you know, every time we are hurting our bodies with every meal. When we stop doing that, then the body gets the chance to start healing. And then the body can really do a really good job, and very quickly. And they start cleaning out these plaques. I think when there are really old calcifications, that might be really hard to clean them out, but they won't hurt you. They will stay there. That's not a problem. But the plaques, as long as they are not really calcified, the body will break that down. So our immune system and everything that's in our body to heal ourselves, cells in our body, the white blood cells, for instance, they will clean out these arteries. And they start doing that, and that might take a while before you get to that the plaque is nearly gone. But people will feel improvement. For instance, chest pain already very quickly in a few days or maybe a week time, they already can feel improvement. And that is maybe not firstly the plaque that becomes already smaller at that instant, but the blood vessels, they become more elastic again, they relax better, the blood becomes thinner because of what we eat, healthy food, and that's why you already see very quickly effects.
I think that what's happening is that animal products, eating them increases your inflammation. And when you stop, it just goes back to normal. Okay, so, I really would love someone to prove me wrong. Yeah, it's interesting. We do call it an anti-inflammatory diet, but when you think about it, it's probably not what's happening. You're probably eating poison, and then the poison stops, and then, you know, so.
So one of the things that really got me started eating this whole food plant-based diet was about 11 months ago, the doctor told me that my gallbladder wasn't functioning at all and that I needed to have emergency surgery. Everything that I'd heard about eating this way was that it can help rejuvenate your body. So 11 months in and my gallbladder is completely functioning again. No surgery, no medication, just changing the food that I put in my body.
I've been cooking since I was very little. My mom was a real big cook. I always would sit in the kitchen and watch her cook, but she cooked, you know, roast, she cooked macaroni and cheese, you know, the typical American food. I had to learn a new way of cooking. But once I did, I became so passionate about getting that message out to other people. You can do this too. You don't have to have milk. You don't have to have meat. You don't have to use tons of oil in your cooking. You don't need those things. You can cook with healthy, whole foods. It can taste amazing, and you can have fun doing it, and you don't need a ton of ingredients.
You're never going to get deficient of fat in your diet. You know, the Irish in 1822 ate a diet that was almost completely composed of potatoes. 7% of their calories were from fat. They had diabetes rates of about 2 per million. Compared with the American numbers that we're getting right now, would suggest that the one thing people don't need to worry about is getting their dietary fat percentage too low. There's no hospital ward for people who haven't eaten enough fat, and there are plenty of hospital wards for people who've eaten way too much fat.
If people were told that these medications, you don't get them for free, you pay a price for using medications, and they work as a permission slip. They enable people to think because their numbers look better, they're okay, while the underlying pathology advances day after day. So in a sense, they give people a false sense of security that leads them to give them permission to keep eating the same diet that caused the problem to begin with, and the inevitable consequence is their disease gets worse and worse and worse. With the right information, more people would choose nutrition as the avenue of getting well and not drugs.
Americans, Europeans are being poisoned by these animal foods, beef and chicken and pork and fish and crab and lobster. And the other large category of poison is vegetable oil, like olive oil and corn oil and safflower oil, all these oils. And they're being poisoned. They get heart disease and obesity and breast cancer and rheumatoid arthritis and horrible bowel problems and everything like that. I take care of hundreds of these people myself as a doctor. I just take away their food poisoning.
The focus on cancer seems to be early detection. Early detection. I would like to see Breast Cancer Prevention Month. Start teaching women what are the factors in your lifestyle, in your diet, that influence whether you're going to get breast cancer or not. But instead, we talk about early detection. Well, early detection's fine, but why not prevent something? Instead, it's like, keep eating the way you're doing, keep doing the things that influence breast cancer in a negative way, but we're going to detect it earlier. That just isn't right.
A high cholesterol level is not caused by a Lipitor deficiency. It's caused by eating bacon and eggs and sausage and cheese and foods that raise your cholesterol. Similarly, diabetes is not caused by a metformin deficiency. If the problem is caused by foods, the prescription ought to be with foods. Let's straighten out your eating habits. And then if I need to add a statin, we can, but I'm going to call that alternative therapy. You know, we started out to do a study for diabetes. And our approach is to really bring in the plant-based foods. But in the course of this study, what you discover is here's a woman who says, not only is my diabetes a whole lot better and I've lost a lot of weight, but my arthritis is gone. Why did that happen? Or here's a man who says, my erectile dysfunction went away. You know? Which, by the way, these are sometimes bigger motivators than the diabetes themselves. But what we discover is when you're putting the right fuel in your tank, a lot of things get better.
Hispanics have a high percentage of diabetes. So I was basically beginning to kind of accept the fact that, hey, this is just my destiny. This is where I've seen my family all go through it. I even asked my doctor, I said, when I began to take my insulin shots, I said, hey, doc, will I ever get off this insulin? And he flat out told me, no, you're going to be on insulin the rest of your life. We adopted this lifestyle on December 3rd of 2011. Not quite 60 days later, I was off all 5 of my medications. So when my wife and I adopted a whole foods plant-based lifestyle, we basically changed the trajectory of my family's future.
How do we expect kids to make healthy choices when they get to college or when they get out of college if they're programmed to eat pizza every single day for lunch? I think that every public school across the country should adopt the meatless Mondays. Let's talk to their pockets. It's less expensive. You're going to save a lot of money. And in turn, they're going to make the kids a lot healthier. Everyone wins. How is that not obvious? That the more we do, the more change we see, and the more exponential that change becomes. I could go on and on. Don't get me going. Don't get me going.
I've never seen anything come close to the breadth and depth of benefits that a plant-based diet provides. I mean, we literally have patients crying tears of joy in our office because they feel so much better. Nobody cried tears of joy, when I write them a prescription for a cholesterol-lowering medication.
At 43 years old, I am free. I spent a decade and a half trapped. My body, I thought, was my tomb. This is where I'm going to be. I have no way out. There's no escape. And then to find out that not only can I escape, but I can come out on the other side like a whole different person. Losing the weight, finding a plant-based diet gave me freedom. Freedom that all the other fad diets and gadgets and even my doctor didn't give me.